All right, we will call the management committee for Wednesday, February 10th to order. Can we, we are running this meeting because of Executive Order 20-01 in response to COVID-19. We are running the meeting virtually. We are can't have public testimony, but people can definitely watch the meeting, and if they have any comments, they can send those to us at public.info@met.state.mn.us. The meeting will also be recorded, so you can rewatch it at a later date as well. So with that, can we call the roll for attendance, please?
Barber.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any changes to the agenda that people would like to see? All right, seeing none, can we get a motion to approve the minutes of the January 27th Management Committee meeting?
Lilligren moves.
Is there a second?
Second by Gonzalez.
Seconded by Gonzalez. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, can we call the roll?
Barber.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
The motion carries. So we have two business items on the agenda today. The first business item is 2021-39 JT, February budget amendment. Stuart?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Stuart McMullen, Director of Budget and Operations, and I'm bringing forward the February 2021 budget amendment. With me and available to answer questions are Heather Augustin-Hebner, Finance Director for CD and MTS, Ed Petrie, Finance Director at Metro Transit, and Teresa Nisler, Assistant Finance Director for Information Services. I also appreciate that a number of the Metro Transit project managers may be on the call and able to answer questions on the projects included in the amendment. Before we get to the amendment itself, we wanted to provide a short update to the committee on the pandemic-related federal funds that are available to the council and the current strategy proposed to use these funds. Lori, you want to go to the first slide? This slide contains a description of the CARES Act funding we received in 2020. As noted, the council received $226 million. After we allocated the respective share of these funds to the suburban transit providers, we had to decide how to allocate the remaining $214 million among the transportation programs at the council. We worked on this in April and May of 2020, and the goal was to be able to balance the 2021 budget for each program. The first step was to determine the estimated lost fare and MVEST revenue for each program, with an emphasis on estimated. Working with our colleagues at MMB and DOT, we assumed there'd be an MVEST reduction of approximately 17%, which we privately thought was optimistic at that point in time, and Ed and Heather estimated the decrease in fare revenue to each of their programs. Using this approach and allocating the CARES funds as a prorated share of lost revenue, we determined how much in CARES funds would be allocated and available to bus operations and planning, light and commuter rail, and metro mobility. This approach allowed us to balance all of the programs at least through calendar year 2021, and for some into 2022. The strategy at that time was to use the funds across 2020 and 2021, and that is how we rolled for most of 2020. Fortunately, MVEST rebounded after some rough months in March through May and outperformed the forecast the rest of the year. As winter approached, Congress began considering a second pandemic bill that would again include transit agencies. We adjusted our strategy to draw down as much of the federal CARES dollars as we could in 2020 so that anyone considering whether the council needed additional federal support would see that we draw down and we're using the CARES funds. You will see when we get to the amendment where we've exceeded the 2020 draw on the CARES funds and a corresponding decrease in the 2021 budget. Questions on this slide or the CARES funds before we turn to the second allocation? Lori, you want to go to the second slide? We now come to what we call the CURSA funds appropriated by Congress in December. We've received confirmation from the FDA that the council's allocation will be $185.9 million. And the direction from the FTA is that the CURSA funds are to be used for program operations with an emphasis on retaining employees through the pandemic. We are awaiting the publication of the program's rules so that we can formally apply for these funds and are hopeful that we will have a final grant agreement in late spring this year. The allocation strategy for the CURSA funds was developed during the time we've been working with the governor's office to develop the governor's fiscal year 22-23 biennial budget proposal. The governor's budget has now formally been released. At this point, after again providing a respective share of the CURSA funds to the suburban transit providers, we're proposing to use the CURSA dollars in the following manner. First, to balance the transportation programs through the end of the upcoming biennium, state fiscal year 2023. We're effectively pushing the fiscal cliff back 18 months further than we are able to do with the CARES funds. We'll be using the CURSA funds to balance the metro mobility and rail operations budgets through that point in time. Second, to internally fund 100% of the transit safety initiative that the governor had proposed in 2020 but was not funded by the legislature. This includes the addition of transit safety ambassadors, additional video monitoring for our transit systems, and additional law enforcement capacity. We'll do this for the fiscal year 22-23 biennium with the aim of approaching our state and local partners for support for this in state fiscal year 24. And third, to use the remaining funds to allow us to fund the most critical deferred maintenance projects in our transit system. We will not use the CURSA dollars for this purpose, but instead swap out MVEST dollars in our 2000 operating budget for CURSA funds and use the MVEST dollars to fund these critical capital maintenance projects. Collectively, this approach allows us to provide significant financial relief to our state and local funding partners this biennium and allows us to move forward on critical transit safety initiative and partially fund the deficit in the capital maintenance budget. So I'll stop there, answer any questions you might have on the CURSA funds before we talk about the amendment itself.
Any questions from council members? All right, go ahead.
Turning to the amendment itself, this amendment makes changes to the operating and capital budget in regional administration and Metro Transit and the operating budget in MTS. The proposed amendment was reviewed and approved by the Transportation Committee this past Monday, February 8th. First is the carry forward of 2 IS projects into the 2021 IS capital budget for building access system replacement and server refreshments, projects that were not completed in 2020. Second is the addition of 4 staff members in information services, one to support environmental services, one to support Metro Transit and MTS and their FTA compliance requirements, and 2 to lead and support the Business Process Systems Integration Project. Next are the changes in the transportation programs. First is a reduction of $39.8 million in federal funds in the 2021 budget in bus operations and planning, and a corresponding increase in the use of reserves. As described earlier, these funds were brought into bus operations in 2020 instead. We'll also reduce the use of MVEST in 2021 by $94.25 million and increase the use of reserves These MVEST dollars will be placed in the Metro Transit capital budget. Next is the addition of $49,000 in federal funds and expenditures for a new Pathway to Policing grant award. It also includes an additional $1.25 million from the FTA for a pass-through grant to Ramsey County for the Rush Line Transit-Oriented Development Pilot Program, as well as matching funds. Lastly, for Metro Transit, it provides for the carry forward of 2 contracts specified in this amendment with remaining balances totaling $171,000. Turning to MTS, the amendment reduces federal funding of $6.7 million for Metro Mobility that was brought into the Metro Mobility in 2020 instead of 2021 and increases the 2021 use of reserves. It adds back the last $1.7 million in CARES funds that was not in either the 2020 or 2021 budget. The amendment also reduces funding for TransitLink by $2.6 million and for fixed route services by $1.6 million in 2021 and increases the use of reserves by the same amount. Collectively, in transportation, we've reduced the federal CARES revenues in the 2021 budget by $50.7 million and increased the use of reserves by the same amount. Turning to the change in the Metro Transit capital budget, the amendment adds $94.25 million to the capital budget. This allows for the funding of 11 new capital bus maintenance projects and 6 new light rail capital maintenance projects, including substantial projects for the Blue and Green Line. These projects are noted on pages 14 and 15 of the amendment. And again, some of the project managers have joined us in the event there are questions on these projects. I thank the committee for your patience on this amendment. The motion is that the Metro Council authorizes the 2021 unified budget as amended and in accordance with the attached tables. With that summary, we could answer any questions the committee might have.
Are there any questions by council members? Last call for questions. All right. Are people good, or are they still looking at the information? Is there a motion to approve business item 2021-39 JT?
Mr. Chair, Lilligren moves to approve.
Seconded by Barber.
Seconded by Barber. Is there any other discussion or questions?
Mr. Chair, if I may, and my apologies
Yep.
to Councilmember Barber, I forgot you're on this call. I could have sort of let you move this, but I just really want to commend all of the staff that's here and the staff that isn't here on the management of these funds. And, it seems like sort of a static thing. We approve a budget for a year, but introduction of new funds, especially federal funds, creates a very dynamic impact across a number of our divisions and departments. And I just think our staff does such a great job in deferring the fiscal cliff. I mean, such a good use of these funds. So I just really want to commend the people that are on this meeting and their teams as well. Thank you.
I would concur with that. Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, can we call the roll, please?
Barber,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion carries. Our second business item is 2021-40, loan agreement with the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority and issuance of GO obligation sewer notes. Mark? I think you're on mute, Mark.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem.
Good afternoon, committee members. You can hear me, right? I am here to present a business item. Well, first of all, Mark Thompson, Senior Manager of Treasury, and I am here to present business item 2021-40, the loan agreement with the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority, and issuance of a supporting general obligation sewer note. The council has a strong, long relationship with the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority, and we participate in their Clean Water Revolving Fund program, which provides low-cost loans to fund capital projects for eligible sanitary sewer and wastewater treatment systems. And approximately annually, we apply for a loan through the PFA program to help fund environmental services capital projects. We use these loans because they're cheaper than the council issuing regular bond issues. They offer a cheaper interest rate, and they also save us bond issuance costs when we use this program. The loans are repaid on a reimbursement basis monthly until the full loan is drawn. And the previous loan was done in late 2019 and was fully drawn in January. So we've applied for a new 20-year, $50 million loan with the PFA. They're offering interest rates that are 0.25% cheaper than we could issue with AAA or AAA bonds. So I should say 0.25% cheaper than the market is on AAA bonds. So it's not a large discount because interest rates are so low at this time, but it is a better interest rate than we could get issuing bonds. We also would save about $150,000 in interest or issuance costs compared to a bond issue. So the PFA also has a minimum of 1%. It's the lowest rate they will offer on these loans, and we expect that will be the rate that we will get. The loan result in overall savings of about $300,000 over the course of the loan. And, it's important that we stay involved with this program. We've been using it for many years, and that's another reason to stay involved in the program, even though the costs this year or the savings this year are not quite what they've been in the past. But so the parameters resolution before you establishes a maximum loan amount of $50 million and a maximum interest rate of 2.5%. As I mentioned, we'll expect the interest rate to be quite a bit lower than that even. The financing structure also includes the council issuing a general obligation note, pledging the council's full faith and credit to secure repayment of the loan. And the repayment of the loan is from revenues of our wastewater system. And the Thrive lens is stewardship, as this is a low cost option to fund our environmental services capital projects. So, Mr. Chair, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council approve the attached parameters resolution 2021-04, which authorizes the regional administrator to execute a loan agreement with the Minnesota Public Facilities Authority in substantially the same form as the attached agreement, and further to issue the related general obligation sewer note securing the loan in substantially the same form as the note attached referenced in the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for presenter on this business item? All right, seeing none, can we get a motion to approve business item 2021-40?
So moved by Gonzalez.
All right, is there a second?
Second by Lee.
All right, any other discussion of the business item? All right, seeing none, can we call the roll, please?
Barber,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. The motion carries. That was our last business item. We have an information item that's on the agenda, and we wanted to make sure we had enough time to go through it in detail this quarter. So this is our Q4 quarterly report on procurement and MCUB spend that Jody and Sai will be presenting for us.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Jody Jacoby. I'm the director of the procurement department, and I'm here today to present this information item with Cy Jordan, Office of Equal Opportunity Director, and Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director, for the procurement summary for fourth quarter 2020. The Council's expenditures policy authorizes the regional administrator to approve awards not exceeding $500,000 for the purchase of goods and services, and awards not exceeding $2.5 million for construction. This report includes a breakdown that's grouped by value and procurement type. And within the last year, the report was updated to utilize the MCUB goals and data. Office of Equal Opportunity will speak to the MCUB utilization. The second page of this report lists a chart with the procurement summary. In 2020, as you'll see, the cumulative total was $734,482,027. And there were 38,128 separate procurements made on either a purchasing card or via a purchase order or a contract during the year. Now looking at the results from 2020 compared to 2019, we had a lot more activity. In 2019, the total spend was $469,789,000, and there were 33,432 events. So comparison, almost 4,700 more events or procurement activities in 2020, and about 265 million more. Under that summary, there's two pie charts. The pie chart on the left represents the procurements by transactions, and it shows that 97% of the total transactions had a value of less than $10,000, which is the council's micro purchase level. And as you're aware, micro purchases don't require a competitive quote. And then the pie chart on the right represents procurements by contract value, showing that 88% of the contract value is greater than $175,000, which is also the threshold for the public advertisement of contracts. And these are the contracts that are advertised on the Doing Business with the Council page. These percentages are pretty consistent quarter to quarter, and also very prevalent and consistent with our local and national public procurement agencies and partners. In 2020, it was absolutely a significant year, not only for the region and the council, but certainly for procurement. So I'll just talk about some notable highlights. We had 18 different emergency declarations. We had the COVID-19 pandemic that we're still in process of, started 11 months ago. And in the spring, the procurement team took quick action to keep our business moving by implementing electronic signatures, virtual pre-bid and pre-proposal meetings, virtual bid openings, utilization and submission of electronic bids and proposals, and really transitioning from a paper to an electronic process seamlessly. And certainly a lot of help from a lot of different partners, especially IS, helping us lift up this process. The purchasing team has many, many unsung heroes working with both warehouse groups in transit and environmental services, and numerous project managers to ensure that we have an adequate supply of PPE with numerous orders, lots of personal phone calls to follow up, and then also expediting. And the contracts team is currently finalizing the execution of a vaccinator contract in coordination with the state of Minnesota. And so the council will be ready when the vaccines arrive, hopefully soon. We helped respond to the summer's civic unrest. And another key effort that we put a lot of focus around was establishing and reestablishing relationships with the business units, prioritizing, aligning, and assuring the roles and responsibilities were met. We have completed multiple procurement training sessions based on some specific needs within the units. Late in fourth quarter, procurement also created a sole source review team to help investigate and then get input on a project to coordinate with the project manager before they proceeded with completing a sole source form. And the review is based on the scope of work, not a relationship with a specific vendor. And in this short time, this has resulted in 5 previous sole sources being redirected to competitive solicitations. So it's really positive, and there's a lot of great work and collaboration helping our partners and our business unit get what they need when they need it at a fair and reasonable price. There were 2 significant policy changes within the year that you, the management committee, helped us with. In June, we increased the micro purchase threshold from 5,000 to 10,000 for all funding types. And then we increased it up to 25,000 if you're using local funds and contracting with an MCUB vendor. And then in August, a prevailing wage policy was implemented on construction contracts greater than 175. And previously, prevailing wage was only included when there was federal fund. So now it's a consistent standard to ensure that anyone working on a council project is being paid a living wage. Some projects that we have that we're working on already in 2021 is we have 4 meet and greets scheduled with MCUB vendors and project managers to help them learn about the council. How do they download documents, relationships with purchasing agents and contract staff, just to help them understand how we do business and some standard requirements that they have. And also that connection with the project managers. So we're excited about that. And then we're also working on a final draft of service level agreements with each business units to clarify timelines, expectations, and to be able to help them move forward. Now, I have one project from this report in particular that I'd like to talk about, and it's on page 5. And in the report, I think it's actually, if you're scrolling through it, it's actually page 6 of the handouts, but when you're in the report, it'll show page 5. It's line 17. And it's MTS onboard technology. And it was a contract value of over $6 million. There was no goal. However, it had 100% utilization by an MCUB vendor. This contract had been awarded, had been in place for 10 years with different vendors. However, this year, when we went out for solicitation, the business unit, the Office of Equal Opportunity, and procurement really focused and collaborated and did outreach to find vendors that were targeted that we believed could provide the services. And the comment back from the vendor about the process, trying to learn information from them, they said that their largest challenge was to overcome the financial commitment to commit to the contract in the midst of the pandemic, and then to support the contract with staff expansion and development. And they said they gained experience over the last few years working with the council and also with the state of Minnesota to develop services to deliver to the council's expectations. Additionally, they expanded their fleet of vehicles to be more reliable to respond to tickets on site and upgrade their policies and requirements. And their comment was when replying to a contract, they focused on deliverables and how they can improve on the department's outcome. And that was done to ensure the objective and thrive initiatives of the council were met in a timely manner. But they said very simply, the most important step that they took was to read the requirements and be focused on the requirements and delivering that in their proposal to the council and really developing a strong team and then establishing that relationship with the business unit. And they just commented that they're really excited to have this partnership and contract with the Met Council. So that's one project in particular that I wanted to talk about. I'm happy to answer questions, or we can hold them to the end and I'll transition to Ashanti and OEO.
Are there any questions now, or do we want to wait till the end? Chai?
Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Lee?
Thanks, Jody. My question was about that contractor's comment. Was that feedback unsolicited, or is there a formal process by which we ask for feedback from first-time contractors in this case?
Yeah, Chair Ferguson, Council Member Lee, that's a standard practice that the contracts team has implemented. When there's an MCUP center, we automatically reach back to them to help them understand how their proposal was reviewed and if they were successful or unsuccessful, because our goal is to help them learn to be successful in the future. And so everyone was so excited that this was a success, and they had previously not been selected for a contract, but used that information to be able to retool to be successful this time. So that's a standard practice.
That's great. Thanks.
Any other questions at this point? We'll have a chance later to ask questions too. Ashanti, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, Council members. Good afternoon, Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director for the Office of Equal Opportunity. And I am appreciative of this opportunity to share some of our MCUB highlights and achievements for both Q4 and year-end totals. There is a lot of data included in this report, and I will address that towards the end of my presentation. But what I want to do is really focus in on what those highlights were, and also identify what the trends are and what the data is telling us in terms of where we should focus our efforts and our resources in improving our spend with MCUB businesses and BIPOC businesses. So for both Q4 and year-end totals for 2020, well, first, let me back up. We increased our MCUB spend goals for 2020 to 14% construction and 10% with goods and services. And both for Q4 and for year-end totals, we exceeded our construction spend with MCUB goals. However, we fell short of our goal in terms of spend in goods and services. And a good demonstration or graphic to demonstrate this information can be found starting on page 41. And it highlights each quarter where we were in the year-end totals. Year-end spend for construction, we wound up at 21%, and which exceeds the goal of 14%. And we ended up at 3% with goods and services, which is far short of our 10% goal that we set for goods and services. We definitely have to have an increased focus in our efforts towards improving our diverse spend towards relative to goods and services. And there are several initiatives that we have undertaken to make those improvements and to make impact. We definitely need to increase our focus and our efforts in engagement with and from our divisions that have significant procurement activity. And specifically, that would be Metro Transit and Environmental Services, who account for the overwhelming majority of our spend in both construction and in goods and services. A good example of this is that, yes, RA, can achieve 37 and 40% in the last 2 quarters, but it's not going to make a really big impact because the overall spend in those 2 divisions is not significant enough to impact the total spend. I do also want to highlight that environmental services exceeded the goals for construction and goods and services in Q4. So I think it is appropriate to recognize environmental services for those achievements. OEO and procurement are developing processes that will make it easier for decision makers and purchasing agents to act intentionally with MCUB businesses, and specifically in terms of our warehouse spend for goods and services and matchmaking MCUBs in our directory with the goods and services that we typically and historically have procured. In addition, OEO is creating a new unit that will have a focus on small business development, outreach, engagement, and it will allow the council to extend our efforts beyond just compliance and our regulatory responsibilities to have impact with our programs and impact on the bottom line. We are increasing our efforts to create connection points for small businesses with the council. Jody mentioned it in her presentation relative to the meet and greets with specific business units and MCUB businesses that provide services to meet the needs of those business units. The other trend that I would like to focus in on that we covered in Q3's report is our spend with businesses owned by Indigenous persons. Again, in Q4, our spend with Indigenous persons was the most of any BIPOC group, which is not typical or normal what you see here at the council or across the state and other agencies. And it actually exceeded the spend that we had with businesses owned by white women. Again, not a normal trend that you see. One of the questions that came from our last presentation in Q3 is that sustainable? Because we know from experience and even recently with the state's recent disparity study that just looking at dollars alone does not always tell you if there is inequities or if there is disparities within a specific BIPOC group. So we did include some charts and data to really draw that out. And those start on page 28 with the demographic spend. And as you can see, although spend with Indigenous businesses in Q3 and Q4 were significant, and in Q4 exceeded even our spend with white female-owned businesses, that the number of businesses that we spend with tells us that that is not a sustainable position. So we still need to focus in on how we can achieve a more equitable distribution, both with our spend and with the number of businesses we engage with and do business with. So that's definitely an important piece of our strategy. We have definitely want and have taken steps to improve our reporting systems and processes, and have really, and that includes both internally identifying the gaps. OEO has also developed a new team with our existing staff, that is our data team, that will have the responsibility both to review our reporting processes and systems, identify gaps, prepare for any questions that we may receive, identify the trends, and make recommendations in terms of where we need to focus in on our efforts and our resources to have impact. We have also included in that process to improve our reporting systems, exploring opportunities to incorporate new technology that exists in the marketplace, and most certainly have included BIPAC-owned businesses who can provide those services as well in our exploration efforts to fully explore that process. So our goal for the next time when we come back here and report on Q1, that we will have a much more streamlined with the information that is really important that you want to see. That includes a dashboard that really focuses in on those important areas. Our disaggregated spend, our spend with BIPOC owned businesses, our achievement towards the goals that we have established, and the direction that we're headed. With that, I will end my presentation and welcome any questions that council members and committee members have at this time.
Do council members have questions?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Francisco. Go ahead, Francisco.
Yeah, thank you.
Gonzalez.
Ashanti, can you tell us more about that new unit that you mentioned that is going to be working with small businesses? Is it already up? Who's going to be working? You know, who's the staff working it, etc.?
Yes, it is not already up. The first hire, we are going to be conducting interviews starting later this month and into the early part of March, starting with interviews. It will include a supervisor and 2 EEO positions. One will be a part of the data team, and also look at our data and trends in different ways and new ways that will help us really measure where we're going. An example of something that we will do right now, as we talked about the meet and greets, one of the things that we would be doing is in terms of preparation and helping businesses prepare for those meet and greets. One, making sure they have a capability statement and something that really captures in a concise manner what they do, what their capacity is, and what their experience is. And if they don't have a capability statement put together, then we would work with them and prepare them for these meetings and meetings with other potential opportunities like subcontracting opportunities and meet and greets with larger contractors who are looking for subcontractors to work and help build projects. The unit will have a focus on small business development, technical assistance, training, and programming in terms of being able to provide both classroom style and hands-on opportunities that will help position them to take advantage of opportunities with the council, and build capacity and expertise, including any certifications required to perform work on our projects. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm just gonna say that I'm very interested in this particular focus on small businesses. So I will say that anything that I can do and the EAC can do to help as you move forward in setting up this unit, etc., just let us know. And the other thing that I will ask is if you can keep me updated of developments with that unit. I know that you do include that or I'm assuming that you will be including that information with any and all other reports issued by the office, OEO, but I just want to make sure that I don't lose whatever is going on with this new unit, get lost in the data. So if there's a way to highlight that so I can keep an eye on that, I'll appreciate it.
Thank you, council member, and definitely we will. We will definitely also share those opportunities from the employment side and job postings with the EAC and internally here at the council as well.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? From council members? So Shanti, just a couple of different facts, I guess. So how do we determine what's excluded?
Yes, thank you, Chair. One of the ways, we looked at what was excluded as part of the state's disparity study. We started there and looking at those things that were excluded from there, but they include things like utility payments, payroll taxes, housing vouchers that we issue, land leases, things of that nature. And then also in this data, it's important to note that federal dollars and federal spend is not included. We capture that in the DBE report. However, as I mentioned before, we have definitely heard from council members that we want a more comprehensive look at our overall spend that includes the federal dollars in there and our total spend with BIPOC and disaggregated data. So when I say the next time or we're taking steps to improve and adjust our reporting systems, those are the things that we're working on to take the data from all these different systems that we depend on and combine them into one effort and one dashboard that will be concise and capture the information that's important that you want to hear. So that's when I said we're working on improving our reporting processes. That's at the forefront.
So are any of the contracts awarded in the first part excluded from the calculation?
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm not sure. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so if we look at our Q4 procurement listing of all these contracts over $175,000, right? So are those included? Because that total was in Q4 was 150 million, which is more than the total included for the entire year, right? So I guess, yep, go ahead.
Yes, I'm gonna let Jody add that, but I'm guessing or talk to that point. But my comment will be that Jody's report is inclusive of federal dollars and much more inclusive of the spend that we have completely at the council than the MCUB reports. But I'm going to let I'm going to defer to Jody on that one.
Mr. Chair, council members, Ashanti's correct. So the report that we're giving is every contract that's been executed and then segregated out into the different categories by spend. But sole sources as well are an exclusion, and they're on the report that I presented. If you look on page, I think the page numbers are a little goofy, but in the packet it's page 6, but page 5 and line 15, there's a project for Cubic, and it's a sole source, and it's over $4 million. So that would be something that would be excluded. Also, again, anything with federal funds would be excluded from this report because the MCUB program is only for locally funded projects.
Right. So, and we've talked about this before, but I think it's important to get on record. Right? So I think that so excluding things like taxes makes a lot of sense, right? Because that's, there's nothing there. But, or excluding things that are pass-throughs, right? So if community development is getting money from the state and passing that directly through to cities, so they're not really spending the money, they're just the entity that passes through, that makes sense. But if we, and it's not just the council, right? I think all government entities do this, is that we're basically saying that even when we exclude 80% of our spend, we are only spending, 3% with businesses of color, right? So now some of that exclusion is covered by the DB, but I think we want to get a sense of, out of our $800 million that we spend, how much of that is with businesses of color? Because we know that population is 32% of the population, roughly 20% of the businesses. So even though there's sole source contracts, right, eventually we want to see some of those sole source contracts actually be owned by, businesses of color or women-owned businesses, as opposed to all being majority-owned and white male-owned businesses. So if we're not looking at the totality of the data, we're kind of giving ourselves a sort of, we feel good about 14%, but it's 14% of the number of what we've determined is available for people of color, right? So, and I think that is misstating sort of how well we are doing as a region, not just the council, but I think Hennepin and others do the same thing, but just how well we're doing with our spend dollars with these businesses. And as a result, we wonder why those businesses aren't able to grow and aren't able to, hire more people, and why we consistently have the highest levels of disparity in the country, while we think we're doing better on some of these metrics, right? But we've excluded, so much of our economy, and we say that they're not eligible to participate in that part of the economy. They're only eligible to participate in a smaller chunk of the economy. So we may want to track those sort of as two numbers, right? Because so that we can, when we're sharing numbers with our peers, that we are, doing it in the same way as they're doing it, but then also be realistic with sort of what our spend is including DB spend, what our total spend with women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses are compared to our overall spend. And I think the question we should ask for the finance people is not only this is only our new contracts, but if I look at the Metro Transit budget or MTS budget or ES budget for 2021, right? They're going to spend $1 billion. How much of that spend is with minority-owned businesses? Because we have a whole ton of contracts that we keep renewing, right? And we're we're only looking at the new contracts that we haven't excluded, that we're measuring numbers for, right? So if I have an existing contract with Metro Transit and I just get a whole bunch of renewals and I don't even go through the process of procurement, then I can do that without even, that doesn't even show up really on the procurement side. It does show up on the, on some of the spend numbers. So just so we can get a total sort of picture of kind of where we're at, because I think it provides the public a better sense of, when people look at it and say we're making great progress, why are we not making better progress in poverty numbers or income numbers or, business size numbers or other things. I think it'll better explain those challenges. And I think we are in the same spot as, all of our peer agencies in the region. It's not that we're doing anything different. It's just, I think sometimes it'd be good for us to lead in sort of being, in how we look at the data and how we make sure we're being kind of realistic with our spend as a percent of our overall budget, right? So if we were spending, for example, 14% of our overall budget with businesses of color, that'd be what, $120 million a year. That'd be a lot of money, right? That's a big difference in saying we're spending 14% of our non-excluded portion. So just as we continue to refine and think about it, and it's just, I think as we look at this, as we look at how do we change the region and reduce the inequities that we have, I think it's important for us to look at the data holistically as opposed to what we choose to exclude. It'd be no different than saying, certain people should make less money because, we've decided that they work differently in the workplace, and so we justify paying people in different jobs who do the same job but look different or are women instead of men. It's okay to pay them less money because we've decided that that they're excluded from these sort of getting the same pay. And I think we've decided that doesn't make any sense. Also, because we shouldn't be thinking that people of color should be excluded and women should be excluded from certain chunks of the economy, because historically they have been, and that's what we're trying to break down. So I think, and I would just say, I think this group has done a phenomenal job of, really understanding and working on this problem. I think what we're trying to solve is incredibly difficult to solve. This has been a stagnant problem for at least the 20 years I've been in the region and longer than that. And so we're fortunate to have some really smart people that are trying to figure out how to do this differently. And Jody and Sai and Ashanti and others on their team. And it is truly not easy work to do this differently and make significant changes that we're trying to make. So these are sort of, we have these conversations offline as well as we work constructively to try to figure out how to do things better. And I think we have really great people that are trying to make this happen. And I think in many ways we are as good or better than our peer agencies, and we just want to continue to lead the region to a spot where we hopefully one day no longer have the level of inequities that we have today. So, Ashanti, just thoughts. One of the things, Ashanti's been doing this for 30 years. So just maybe any thoughts on, as you see us sort of evolve over 2021, anything you might need from the management committee to do things better or differently, things that you're thinking we're not doing well.
Thank you, Chair. I think really from that standpoint and our perspective is there's definitely ways that we can improve as an agency and do things differently, as you mentioned. And I'm most certain there are going to be points in times where I'm going to be looking to Sai and Jody to come to our leadership and to the management committee because we need something or we've asked for something. And thus far, the council and the management committee has been responsive, and the leadership has been responsive to the things that we're saying we're asking for and we need. Also, as we dive deeper into this topic that you just covered in terms of our reporting, I'm I'm foreseeing probably that there's going to be some asks in that regard, relative to historically having reporting systems and processes that are geared around regulatory requirements, which don't really mean that we're measuring equity in striving towards equity. So I do anticipate that we will be asking for support in multiple areas moving forward.
Well, I would just say, let us know what barriers we can remove from the work that you're doing and how we can help. Because if there's some policy that we've created, sometimes without even knowing the ramifications of it, or it was put in place 25 years ago and no one's really thought of it, or preventing you from doing more, let us know and we can make those modifications and change things. Any comments from council members? So I would just share with this group as well. I think most of you know, but there has been a discussion group that was formed of BIPOC members that might end up becoming a working group of the management committee to look at reducing inequities in the region. And so this is the sort of nuts and bolts of some of this work is sort of what that group is wanting to get at. And just broadly, because sometimes we don't have enough time at a management committee meeting or a committee of the whole meeting or a council meeting to really kind of get into the details and the weeds of the policy changes that we need to make or other changes that we might need to make to be able to enable this work to happen and make sure Shanti and Sai and Jody can do the job that they're trying so hard to do.
Council member, if I may.
Go ahead, Sai. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. And so I want to thank Ashanti and Jody for their presentation and staff for the work that they've done in preparing this information. That's a collective thank you between HR and OEO and procurement as well. There are a couple of asks that we do have in the equity funding award that is a collective ask between HR, procurement, and OEO around some areas where we can increase workforce equity in our contracting, as well as some initial software systems that we will need to move us forward in our work, and then some programming funds to help support that new unit of business engagement and development. So that's certainly a request that we do have out there. I have heard about the BIPOC committee that is our working group that's forming. And so I also have an ask to be present in discussion or often invited to that, as it impacts a lot of the work and the progress that we're trying to make within our department. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments? No? Acting regional administrator. Ms. Bogey, anything on your end?
No, Mr. Chair, I do really appreciate this conversation and the acknowledgement that staff are really working hard to be creative in ways to move us towards the outcomes that we're looking for. I agree that it does take some work to create systems that give us data in the way that we want to see them. I very much agree with Ashanti that our systems have been built in the past to meet regulatory requirements, and so often we don't have the data in the system, and so we spend a lot of time, adding elements to the vendor file, for instance, to say that to be able to disaggregate this data. And also, when we're working with a prime contractor, that prime is paying that vendor. And so we don't have that data either. And we had to pull that data into our systems, even though we're not the direct payer of some of those contracts. So I appreciate that there's some complexity to this that you've been patient with us working through, and we'll continue to get our data better and be able to both tell the story of where we're going and have a good sense of where we're at. So I really appreciate the recognition that people are working really hard on this.
Well, and to be really clear, I mean, the quality of the reporting, if you look at the data that's available now compared to 2 years ago, right? I mean, it's really night and day different already. And you guys are just doing that sort of by brute force, probably Excel spreadsheets, et cetera, in the background, as opposed to having better systems. So at least now we can really be talking about real data and looking at things and trying to figure out how we can make things better for everybody in the region. And so this is, I mean, it's night and day different and better than we were looking at before. So, and I'm sure, as I've used to have to do some of these reports, it is probably a labor intensive and time consuming process in the background. So thank you very much for that data and all that information.
Appreciate that.
Anything else from council members? All right, seeing nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.